Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. I'm Joyce Murray, Senior Improvement Advisor, and we're just going to do a couple of housekeeping things before we get kicked off with our webinar this afternoon. So moving on to our housekeeping slide, the webinar will run for approximately an hour and a half. We'll definitely finish on time, if not earlier, and we'll also be recording the webinar. We've got closed caption functions for subtitles, and please use the chat to ask any questions because we've disabled the microphones, so there's no interference. We'll have Q&A at the end, and we'll send out the slides and recording by email after the webinar. We'll also have a evaluation form and a QR code posted in the chat, so we'd like some feedback if possible, please. That would be really helpful. It always helps us to get some feedback and shape future webinars as well. So we're going to be having a bit of an interactive session this afternoon. We're going to be having some videos and polls. So it would be helpful if folks just waited and took a second or two for the poll to appear in the chat, because sometimes it takes a minute or two, and then if people start typing, it moves it up and folks miss it. So it would be helpful just to bear that in mind. So moving on to our next slide. We're here today to talk about our recent joint publication, Good Care for Vegans and Vegetarians who are living in care. And I've been delighted to work with Kim Stringer on this piece of work. And we've got Kim with us on the call this afternoon, who's the Director for Scotland for Vegetarian for Life, and also Amanda Woodvine, who's the Chief Executive. So they're our main speakers this afternoon. And we've also got Chris Bonner from HC1, who will join us later in the webinar, who shares his experiences around also working with Vegetarian for Life. So as we've advertised this webinar UK-wide from both organisations, I'd just like to take a moment in case there are colleagues on the call who may not be familiar with the workings of the Care Inspectorate. So I'm just going to take the opportunity to work through a few slides. So the Care Inspectorate regulates social care, the social care sector and social work services in Scotland. We also have a duty to further improve care services, and we also support providers to do this. So moving on to our next slide shows us that we regulate around 11,500 services from early learning childcare, children and young people, adults and older people's care. So there's currently just under 800 care homes for older people and 250 adult care homes. And that's the client group that our quality illustration, Good Care for Vegans and Vegetarians, is aimed at. So moving on to our next slide. Our vision is for Scotland to have world-class social care and social work, where everyone experiences high quality care tailored to their needs and wishes. Excuse me while I remove my cardigan. So to achieve our vision, we've got 4 strategic outcomes: high quality care and improving outcomes for all. Everyone's rights are respected and realised, and the people working in care are skilled, confident and well supported to carry out their roles. So our next slide shows us our approaches, and we look on every contact counts towards improvement, whether that's an inspection, a complaint, or an improvement visit or workshop. And our work focuses on people's experiences and outcomes. We also want to see that people's safety, protection, well-being and human rights are respected. And we also want to ensure that good practice is promoted to inform safe, effective care. So by promoting a self-evaluation and improvement approach, organisations and staff are helped to make sustained improvements which will last. And it's also important to have that user experience and involve people experiencing care in that approach. So as well as our inspectors, who are our biggest Ambassadors for Improvement. On our next slide, we see that we've got our Health and Social Care Improvement team. So our role is to give topic-specific advice and support across the organisation and the sector, and promote the self-evaluation and quality improvement approaches. So through our QI workshops with our colleagues in the improvement support team and webinars, we teach QI methodology, good practice on health-related topics. So we're also part of national improvement programmes, such as the Caring About Physical Activity programme or the Pain Check work that's going on right now. And our role is around building good relationships with both health and social care colleagues. So moving on to the next slide, this is the makeup of our team. We're a multidisciplinary nursing, AHP and pharmacy, and cover key health areas. And we also have Jenny, who's on our call today, who's our improvement support officer, who's providing our technical support this afternoon. So our next slide shows us our aim is really about supporting providers and staff to help people experiencing care to have a good life. It's making sure that the important areas are part of their daily living, even though they have to move into a care home. So it's about doing that life stuff, the things that matter to people, hobbies, keeping up their connections with family, with local community, and doing things that they enjoy. And also other areas that keep people well, such as eating and drinking well, staying active and moving around, and managing those healthcare needs that people have. So moving on to my final slide is just a bit of background about the quality illustration. So why did we want to use this format? We found it's a tried and tested way of illustrating good or poor practice to both our inspectors, providers, care services and their staff. It promotes a self-evaluation approach, which leads to improvement in care and support. And we've also linked it to the health and social care standards and good practice. So the content's not just about people's dietary needs, it's also about their lifestyle and people's choices and maintaining their vegan or vegetarian identity when they go into care. So there's a lot of good practice happening. You only need to look at the Vegetarian for Life website to see this in action. And we know that numbers of people living in care in Scotland are quite low at the moment. So perhaps it's not about the here and now, but more about raising awareness and about future-proofing care and support when people do go into care, and making sure that there are resources and information to support care services. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Amanda, who's going to present this afternoon. Welcome, Amanda.
Oh, lovely. Thanks very much, Joyce. So good afternoon, everybody. I am, as billed on the screen, Amanda from Vegetarian for Life. And so by day, I act as Chief Exec of Vegetarian for Life. By night, I'm a trustee of a Manchester-based dementia charity. And I'm often asked at Vegetarian for Life why there needs to be a charity specifically for older vegans and vegetarians. So with this in mind, I have got a short film lined up, but I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction to it and why I'm telling this story. So we have footage of a really inspiring woman, I think, called Serena Coles. And this is footage dating back to the 1970s, where she was filmed doing a programme for BBC Two, where she's talking about her vegan beliefs. So if I just invite us to watch this short film, and then I'll just explain a bit more.
This is Serena Coles, one of our vice presidents. She's been a member almost from the beginning of the society, and she's a medical social worker. Tell us something of your experience.
Well, I became a vegetarian in 1943 during the difficult days of the war. And in those days we knew nothing about B12 or many of the other things that we now have Soon afterwards, I realised that I wanted to become a vegan because I suddenly knew that so much cruelty was involved with dairy produce.
And I believe you also brought up a son as a vegan.
Yes, my son was born in 1945, and I maintain, rightly or wrongly, that this was partly because I had improved so much in my own health that I was able to conceive.
Excellent, thank you for playing that. So introducing there, as I said, Serena Coles, an early vice president of the Vegan Society. And although people perhaps think of veganism as a younger person's trend, perhaps, Serena illustrates that there have been vegans in the UK at least since 1944, which is when the UK Vegan Society was founded. And I think Serena speaks very confidently and is very articulate about her vegan beliefs and how important they are to her. But really sadly, people lost contact with Serena over the years. And in the 1990s, Serena was found, she developed dementia by that point, and she was living in a care home, but she was eating meat and dairy. But one of her first vegan visitors gave her a visit. She was wearing a Vegan Society lapel badge, and Serena was able to point at the lapel badge and say, "Vegan, I'm a vegan, and that's new." Now, there was a bit of an uphill, sadly to report, struggle with the care home to get Serena back to the vegan diet and lifestyle that obviously she would have wanted. And sadly, Serena's story, though, isn't a unique one. So because we're a mixed bunch probably in the audience, I'd just like to introduce the first poll, just to see who we have here today. So the first poll asks whether any of the current people that your care organisation caters for, whether they're vegan or vegetarian. So if we can just take a few moments to vote in that. It looks like we have 17 veggies in care homes that are, or organisations that are represented here. Oh, it's gone up to 18. 11 with one or more vegans and 5 saying no. And obviously we've got some individual responses in the chat as well. So you might be interested in how that compares with the wider care home population. So this is something that every 5 years, my organisation, VFL, actually conducts research on. So the most recent survey that we conducted was 2019 data that suggested around 1 in every 5 UK care homes at the moment has at least one vegetarian or vegan resident. So that makes around 7,000 vegetarians or vegans in total in UK care homes. So it's definitely not the majority that have a veggie or a vegan resident, but looking at other surveys that have been conducted. So a British social attitude survey that was commissioned by the Vegetarian Society, for instance, looked into attitudes towards meat reduction, and it found that older adults were twice as likely to now describe themselves as a meat reducer, if not fully vegetarian or vegan, twice as many as younger adults. So it's very much a growing, I don't like to call it a trend, because as we've seen from Serena, it's not a new thing. Now, with this in mind, and with stories such as Serena, 2 years ago, something called the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Vegetarianism and Veganism launched an inquiry. And this is an inquiry into respect for religious and philosophical beliefs while eating in care. And this is something, if you're interested in reading, is available on the VegAPVG website. So it's vegapvg.org.uk. Now, unfortunately, the parliamentary inquiry found that meals in hospitals and other care settings, and particularly thinking of the vegan and the veggie options, might be inadequate nutritionally. Those meals don't always promote good health, and in some cases, they're not appetising. And when we were supporting the All-Party Parliamentary Group with the inquiry, we came across a Facebook page, and this was specifically set up to support people with access to food when they're in hospital. It's called the Vegan Hospital Food Network, and it's to support people, as I say, with access to food when they're in hospital, and it's a group that has 2,000 members from across the UK. And when we looked at posts to the page in early 2020, when we were doing the inquiry, we found that 71% of the posts to this page were requesting that food was specifically brought in for vegan patients in various hospitals. Not ideal that people are having to resort to other members of the community bringing them food. Now, most commonly, the report was that vegans in hospital were served a dry jacket potato with beans for 2 of their main meals every day. Many hospitals didn't have plant-based milk, they didn't have dairy-free butter or plant-based products. And if you're a patient, of course, that may well leave you feeling hungry, unsatisfied, and perhaps uncomfortable. Speaking personally as a vegan of 20 years, there's thankfully a growing availability of plant-based products, and I was thrilled to see the rise of exclusively vegan wholesale catalogues, which have only cropped up in 5 to 7 years, which has been amazing. And the reason for this, obviously the driving force, is the rise of veganism in the UK, the increased number of people that now consider themselves perhaps flexitarian, or that are actively reducing their meat intake, whether that's for ethical, health or environmental reasons. Now, as I say, Vegetarian for Life is the UK care charity supporting older vegetarians and vegans and those who cater for them. So the mainstay of our work is with the care sector, and we already work with 1 in 6 of all UK care homes and with 4 of the big 5 care chains by market share. So if you're not already a member, please do visit our website, vegetarianforlife.org.uk, and consider signing up today, because there's an awful lot of support available. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. There is some really good practice out there. Just last month, we returned to Parliament to present our annual awards for excellence in vegetarian and vegan care catering. And for the 2nd year running, we held a Hospital Caterer of the Year category. So as I say, some really good practice out there. Now, if I were to summarise from really inspiring entries to our awards, what the commonalities of good practice are, I would say they include providing lots of vegan options and a wide variety of choice from a patient perspective. It's been really heartening for me that so many care establishments are now joining in with regular meat-free Mondays. We're even seeing monthly veggie and vegan lunch clubs popping up inside care homes themselves, which is offering your residents the chance to try out new dishes before they make it onto the menu. We're seeing menus that are clearly marked as vegan or vegetarian, so that would have really helped someone like Serena. Again, she recognised the vegan symbolism, so it's something that's giving someone with dementia a reminder of their identity. And those menus, in the best cases, can be viewed ahead of any stay, so that's really reassuring for you as a potential resident. These good care homes and hospitals have done a thorough nutritional analysis of their menus. They make vegan snacks and drinks available at all times. I've even seen cases of vegan vending machines popping up as a hospital pilot, which is excellent practice. And of course, there's been consideration to finger foods for anyone who has problems using cutlery. Now, with this in mind, we are thrilled to have worked with the Care Inspectorate to distill all of this good practice. And we've produced for the first time guidance on good care for vegetarians and vegans. And they're based on the health and social care standards. So they'll give you the chance to benchmark practice in your own care settings. And if you find that improvements are needed after looking at the guidance, we've listed a whole raft of resources at the end of this new resource. So we'll link out to menu plans. We have a British Dietetic Association endorsed nutrition guide. We have texture modified guidance. We have food fortification, all available to read online via our website. We even have veggie and vegan talking mats as a communication tool and bespoke training through our cookery school, which can reach you wherever you are in the UK. So we really have developed some quite specialist resources. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Kim, who's going to explain more about the new resource.
Muted. You're on mute.
Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Jenny. So I've gone for a frosty theme here. It seemed appropriate with winter on its way. But the train is also, I think, an appropriate image for somebody's life journey. And I think it's important to remember and acknowledge their life journey as they enter care or if they're in their later years. And it also represents the journey that we undertake together and the way that we look to bridge gaps in knowledge. So just a bit of outline about these quality illustrations and why we created them. And I'm going to look also at just very briefly about the reasons why somebody might be vegetarian or vegan. A very quick glance at vegetarian and vegan diets. And then we'll look at various parts of the quality illustrations in a bit more detail, and we'll illustrate those with some case studies as well. And then we just end with some final resources. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the quality illustrations. So this started a while ago when I was part of the Care Inspectorate Short Life Working Group creating the Food and Fluid resource. And that resource is available on the hub as well. So it came out of part of the overall desire to provide information and support in terms of good care for vegetarians and vegans. We want to raise awareness as well. There might be things that people haven't thought about in relation to vegetarianism and veganism, and people may have questions generally. And then one of the key points of this resource was how we could show that you can meet the health and social care standards in relation to your care of vegetarians and vegans. And we wanted to show this in a clear and easy way. It's a self-evaluation tool for care services and providers to use to assess your practice and to improve if needed. And as I said, it's a way to show that you're meeting the health and social care standards. It's also a handy tool for inspectors. If you're going to do an inspection of a care service where there are vegetarians or vegans, especially if you don't perhaps know much about the topic yourself, then it's hard to evaluate someone's practice. So we hope that this would be very helpful. It's about striving towards best practice. And these illustrations show both good examples and bad examples of good or bad care. And then we'll look at a little bit of some of the illustrations a bit later. Next slide, please. So why are people vegetarian or vegan? There are a number of reasons. And this relates to page 2 of the QI's document in relation to quality indicator 1.3, that people's health benefits from their care and support. So there are many reasons, but these are some of the common ones. And some of these are reasons of philosophical belief, such as animal welfare, care for the environment, religion or spirituality. Some are reasons such as family values, and some are more pragmatic, such as cost or health. A plant-based diet is something slightly different from veganism. So somebody following a plant-based diet may be following a vegan diet, but they're not necessarily following a vegan lifestyle. And this may be more likely perhaps if they're following a plant-based diet for health or cost reasons. And in this case, they may not have any strong feelings about leather or animal-based clothing or furniture and so on, or they may not have any special requirements about toiletries and cleaning products. For a vegan or vegetarian, however, cruelty-free products and no animal ingredients would be important. So we think it's something that's important to consider when you're assessing your care for vegetarians and vegans. It's also worth noting that veganism is a protective characteristic of religion or philosophical belief under the Equality Act. And it's something also that we think it's important to bear in mind when it comes to capacity and unusual requests. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail later on. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the diets, and this is replicated on page 3 of our document, but it's just a quick at-a-glance clarification of what veggies and vegans do and don't eat. And there can be some confusion around this, so I think it's just worth summarising. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to have a quick look at that. I don't need to read all that out, I don't think. And next slide, please. So moving on to the quality illustrations themselves, as Joyce said, these relate to the Scottish Government's health and social care standards. And so what we've done is we have the standard listed at the top, and then we have illustrations of good or weak practice below. And this would relate to the 6-point scale used in a report, for example. So we would say good practice, very good practice would be around a 5 or a 6, and weak practice would be around a 1 or a 2. And it's a way to evaluate if a care service or provider is providing good care for vegans and vegetarians in relation to the standards. So as I'm sure you're aware, 5 principles underpin the standards, and these are dignity and respect, compassion, be included, responsive care, and support and well-being. And these principles reflect the way that everyone should expect to be treated. So this is page 4 of a document, and it relates to standard 1.15. My personal plan, sometimes referred to as a care plan, is right for me because it sets out how my needs will be met as well as my wishes and choices. And I'm just going to pick out various parts of these illustrations. They are available, so you can access them. So examples of good practice would be to include dietary requirements in the initial conversation, as well as reviewing this later. It would also be good to check whether somebody expresses their vegetarian or vegan identity in other ways, for example, in their toiletries or their cleaning or their clothing. And again, it might be worth reiterating the difference between plant-based diets and veganism, and a reminder that veganism is a philosophical belief system. And it would be an example of weak practice to not ask about dietary preferences and to not consider any other aspects of a person's vegan or vegetarian identity. It would also be weak practice to be aware of a person's dietary requirements, but to take no action to meet those needs and preferences. We would all hope this wouldn't be the case, but as part of our APPG inquiry report, which Amanda mentioned, we'd collected some case studies. One of these stories was a Care Worker Tuesday, and unfortunately it does demonstrate this point. Next slide, please. So Tuesday had been a care worker, and she'd worked in various care homes across the UK for over 14 years. As a vegan herself, she was very aware of what vegetarians and vegans do and do not consume. However, Tuesday found that some care homes did not seem to care about an individual's belief, even when they were outlined in the care plan. One particularly difficult situation was when Tuesday discovered a resident who was 85 and needed full care because she was non-verbal and could not move her limbs without assistance. This resident was given the same 3 meals every day: porridge for breakfast and mashed potatoes with minced meat and peas for the other 2 main meals, but she often tried to refuse the food. She was labelled as aggressive or a bite risk. Tuesday looked at the resident's care plan and recognised that this resident was labelled as a vegetarian. The caregivers, however, had been mixing all of her food together in a bowl and feeding it to her. She couldn't taste different flavours or textures, and most importantly, she wasn't able to refuse the meat. When Tuesday realised this resident was vegetarian, she brought it to the attention of the care management and chefs, but she was told to feed meat to the resident anyway, claiming she needed it for nutrition and she wouldn't feel full enough without it. Sadly, this resident passed away with no solution being found for her. And Tuesday said, and I quote, "When I first discovered our resident PL was vegetarian and being fed meat, I was horrified. Horrified that her care plan either hadn't been read or was blatantly being disregarded." And one of the other points that I think this raises is the mistaken belief that meat is needed for nutrition. And I think this perhaps highlights the need for some specific skills training in relation to this. Next slide, please. So just returning to standard 1.15 again. And here we talk about a person's capacity, if it's affected or their cognition changes. And I think Amanda mentioned this, but something like a talking mats could be a useful tool to help in this situation. Next slide, please. So Talking Mats is a social enterprise whose vision is to improve the lives of people with communication difficulties by increasing their capacity to think about and communicate effectively about things that matter to them. And this innovative award-winning communication tool is based on extensive research and was designed by speech and language therapists. So there are a range of MAT topics, but there's nothing that looks specifically at the type of topics that might be very specifically relevant to vegetarians and vegans. So we worked with the Talking Mats team to create a resource. Amanda and I are now both licensed trainers, and we can offer training in how to use MATs generally, as well as our resource specifically. So we have 4 topics in our resource, and these are values, lifestyle, my dietary choice, and my eating experience. An eating experience covers topics generally related to the eating experience, but with a focus as well on some topics that are more relevant to vegetarians and vegans, for example, the smell of meat. And the dietary choice topic looks at people's food preferences, covering general items as well as those related more specifically to vegetarian and vegan food preferences, for example, tofu or beans, vegan cheese, mock milk, meats, plant milks, and so on. And then values and lifestyle, these are both more abstract topics, but it's a real opportunity for people to discuss their lifestyle choices and for a conversation about why someone is vegetarian or vegan. Next slide, please. So looking at another of the standards, standard 1.37, my meals and snacks meet my cultural and dietary needs, beliefs, and preferences. So again, I think it's very relevant. So in terms of good practice, well, staff would fully understand the terms vegetarian and vegan, and they would have received training appropriate to their role. Meals would be nutritious, healthy, and balanced. Vegetarians and vegans also like choice. Sometimes there could be one meal on offer. You don't always want to eat the one meal that you're basically offered to eat. Perhaps vegetarians and vegans do just like beans on toast or beans with a baked potato, but it's always really good to have choice. Having limited choice or having unchanging options would be regarded as weak practice. A second choice could easily be a sauce-based dish, which could be made that could then have meat or vegan protein added. So that option is available, but it's not wasteful. But a sauce-based dish such as curry does need a protein source for vegetarians and vegans. It could be easy to add corn or lentils or beans or peas or a number of other things. I think, as Amanda touched on, the use of symbols can be a really good way for people to recognise those dishes that may be suitable for them. And in terms of weak practice, staff wouldn't be clear about what vegetarians or vegans do and don't eat. So examples here are Worcester sauce and honey, but sometimes it's even more obvious than that. And that brings us on to John's case study. So John's parents were both vegetarian for over 30 years. His father ended up in hospital with dementia, but was regularly given meat. And John felt that this put him in a very difficult ethical position. But what I'm really going to talk about here is John's mother. So John's mother also was diagnosed with dementia. However, she was very clear that she would never want to eat meat, even if she was no longer able to make decisions for herself. John's mother was in hospital, and she was also served meat on multiple occasions. And the answer to this was that because she couldn't explain why she was vegetarian, then she wouldn't be given vegetarian meals. And John's mother was unable to make any choices or decisions when she was hospitalised. So that was quite distressing for both John and his mother. But finally, his mother moved into a care home, and that seemed to cater well for vegetarians. Unfortunately, it later came to light that the chef thought vegetarians ate fish, so she was being served meals containing fish until John was able to correct that with them. So he feels, as a result of his experiences, that he cannot trust institutions to cater appropriately for vegetarians and vegans because of misunderstanding of the belief. John and his parents both had not been treated with the dignity and the respect they would have expected. And I think it also highlights the need for catering staff to be involved in any discussions and that food and health are spoken about together. Next slide, please. So looking at standard 1.37 again, looking at another example of wheat practice, this might be that there's an over-reliance on cheese and eggs for vegetarians. Many vegan options would be welcomed by vegetarians, although of course each individual is different. But we mention again the need to include protein for both vegetarians and vegans. And as Amanda mentioned, we have a range of resources and we offer caterer training and we have clear information about a number of these things. So do visit our website. And we also have good information which is available on the Food and Fluid resource on the Care Inspectorate's hub. And the snacks are also mentioned in this standard. And we say it can be easy to choose snacks that are suitable for everybody. Many common snacks are accidentally vegan and a large number are vegetarian, although you do have to watch out for hidden animal ingredients too in things like flavoured crisps, for example. But again, it's no good having vegan or vegetarian biscuits and snacks if this isn't made clear. Next slide, please. So standard 4.2, the organisations that support and care for me help tackle health and social inequalities. We're going to talk about celebrations a bit here, because it's important too that these are inclusive and we need to consider how well this is done. For example, somebody might be present at a barbecue but might not get the same choice of food. We were asked to advocate for a lady with moderate dementia in a care home in Bognor Regis. Her vegan option, while everyone else was having a barbecue, was a potato salad. There's something really comforting about cooking food outside and gathering around to eat together. And while it may look like this lady was given an alternative, it wasn't comparable and it didn't allow her to really fully be included. But it would also be important to cook vegetarian or vegan options separately. Many vegetarians and vegans wouldn't want to eat food that's been cooked together with meat. So we suggest here that perhaps a disposable barbecue might be an easy way forward. And it's really important to have good communication, and it's really important to know what's being served, which dish is which is suitable. And we say as well, don't make assumptions. I've quite often been told that wine's just grapes if I ask if it's vegan. And be open and inquiring. Why might somebody ask this? What might it be that makes it vegan or not? I would also say, if you don't know something, say. It's better to not know. It's better to be honest. And it's fine if you don't know. People would rather go without than discover they've eaten something against their philosophical belief. Next slide, please. So standard 3.13. I'm treated as an individual by people who respect my needs, choices and wishes, and anyone making a decision about my future care and support knows me. And again, I think that's a really critical thing. And it's especially important in relation to changes in capacity or cognition. And that can be a really challenging situation, but we think it's important that people are served food according to their beliefs. And there are a couple of case stories here. Next slide, please. So the first one, which Amanda mentioned, is Serena Coles. And I think here the very fact that she had dementia, she was eating meat, but she recognised the Vegan Society lapel badge and said that she was vegan too. So she clearly still identified as vegan and she didn't realise she was eating meat. So there can be a belief that vegetarians or vegans wouldn't know any differently. And perhaps this is true in terms of the food that Serena was eating, but it is a real betrayal of her identity and her life choices. It seems very unlikely that Serena would have been eating meat if she'd realised. And for someone who'd been so passionately vegan and whose identity was so fully wrapped up in this, it feels wrong to have been giving her meat. Next slide, please. So Mr. Smith, and this is a case study that came from our inquiry report. So he entered care in 2016 after his dementia had progressed and he needed additional care. And his care plan outlined that he did not eat meat or fish. However, Mrs. Smith visited her husband every evening, even though he no longer had any memory of who she was. And she had concerns about what he was eating because his food chart had listed meals such as salmon with vegetables. So care workers had reassured Mrs. Smith that Mr. Smith didn't eat that and that it was a mistake on the food chart. However, after 3 years in care, one care worker confirmed that Mr. Smith had indeed eaten salmon and he had enjoyed it. Mrs. Smith was upset and hurt. My husband's vegetarian diet was one of the last remaining parts of his identity. Knowing that he ate meat and the care worker said that he enjoyed it hurt me. My husband would have never eaten that. But Mr. Smith unfortunately cannot recognise food, nor can he feed himself. And having discovered that the care worker had fed her husband fish when his care plan outlines that he does not eat meat or fish because of philosophical beliefs, Mrs. Smith lost faith in the care home's ability to care for her husband's needs. She's still pushing for her husband's belief to be respected, but is scared of making it too big a deal in case they give him a notice to quit. And I think what's common to these case studies as well is stress that it causes the family. Next slide, please. So we're just back to standard 3.13. And down at the bottom, you'll see that we talk about fortification and thickening agents, and I'll come back to those. But first, back to examples of good practice. But it's good practice to offer meals, drinks, and snacks that uphold a person's belief if their capacity or cognition is affected or changes. Why not promote a veggie dish of the day rather than a meat one? And offering meat-based dishes without offering an alternative would be weak practice. And good practice might be to offer an alternative dish that looks similar. In the weak illustration, we have the belief that vegans or vegetarians wouldn't know any differently. And this may have been true in the case of Mr. Smith himself, but it was extremely distressing for the family. Next slide, please. So here we have 2 cottage pies. And one of these is meat, and one of these is vegan. And we'd say, can you tell which is which? So if somebody requests cottage pie, is it a real request for meat, or is it a mistake? Do they think perhaps that it's vegan? So on the left-hand side of these pictures, that's the meat one, and on the right is a vegan shepherd's pie. So we'd say if it is a meat-based dish that's on offer, could you offer a vegan version instead, so that beliefs are upheld, but that distress is minimised? There are easy switches. You could add soya, mince, corn, lentils, or a number of other things. So we'd say, do people really want meat in this case, or do they want a veggie alternative? Do they think it's vegetarian already? Quite often vegetarians or vegans might say they want some milk or they want a sausage roll. They don't necessarily mean a meat one. They just don't say a vegan sausage roll, and they don't say plant milk or vegan milk. As an example of good practice, HC1 has trained more than 1,000 staff in the 5 fundamental good practice points of VFL's Memory Care Pledge. Next slide, please. So it's just a quick look here at our memory care pledge. Now, Chris Bonner is going to be joining us shortly, and I expect that he'll say more about this. So I won't say much just now, except just to let you have a quick look at it, and we can talk about it later if anybody would like to. But you can just see here our 5 fundamental points. Next slide, please. So also in relation to standard 3.13, we mentioned fortified foods and texture modified diets. So food fortifications, I'm sure everyone's aware, is traditionally quite dairy based, but there are a large number of foods that can be used instead. And these include things like pea protein and chickpea powder, soya yogurt, peanut butter, creamed coconut. Can also use cream cheese alternatives, vegan cheese, cashew nut butter, oat cream, syrup, dairy-free spread, and vegan butter. And there are a number of thickening agents which are also vegan, and some of these are products such as agar or arrowroot, potato starch, rice flour, tapioca flour, wheat flour. But there are also some commercial ones, although it may not be immediately clear, and you may need to investigate further which might be vegan. Next slide, please. So I think Amanda also showed you some of these, but it's just a quick glance at some of the publications that we have. Next slide, please. And just a few more of the standards. So standard 1.38, I can choose to make my own meals and snacks. And we've created some recipe cards with some very easy to make recipes so that residents could engage in making their own meals together with perhaps support from somebody. Standard 110. I'm supported to participate fully as a citizen in my local community. So again, in terms of good practice, you could provide links to local vegan groups, perhaps invite people in to speak. I know that's a bit more difficult in this sort of post-COVID world, but if you have magazines, can you have relevant magazines? Can you use memory aids? For example, going back again to Serena's story, the lapel badge reminded her of her vegan identity, and it would remind those around her. Could staff wear a badge, or could residents wear a wristband? Next slide, please. So this is standard 1.4 in relation to household goods and personal care. And again, it's just back to this, what we said at the beginning about if somebody is vegan for a philosophical belief reason, that it would matter that products are cruelty-free and don't contain animal ingredients. And in standard 1.7, I'm supported to discuss significant changes in my life, including death or dying, and this is handled sensitively. So the standard anticipatory care plan does give you the option to say what's important in your life and to mention your spiritual and cultural beliefs. Perhaps there's nothing that blatantly obvious about diet. You may not necessarily think of this, but we'd say it's definitely worth considering this. And also VFL have got a care plan too. And if somebody asks for meat, if there's a contradictory request for meat, then talking maps could be used here to perhaps understand what's going on. If you use the values map together with dietary choice, you could start to put together a picture. If somebody's asking for a sausage roll, but they've said they're vegan for animal welfare reasons, then they probably mean a vegan sausage roll. Next slide, please. So it's just the final part of the quality illustrations document, the scrutiny and improvement toolbox. And we just say that you could use these quality illustrations to assess how well the person receiving care is supported in their veggie or their vegan beliefs. Contact VFL, we can help with a whole number of things. We have a whole range of training and guides. A care plan could include a talking mat, which might help the person to express their identity. Communication is key. Speak to those experiencing care, speak to the staff, family, speak to other staff. Are people supported to choose vegetarian or vegan meals? Are there good choices? Are they clearly vegetarian or vegan? Is a vegetarian or vegan dish of the day promoted? Does an advanced care plan include their wishes about their vegan identity? It could include a mat. And then we have a number of key improvement resources, obviously our website, the Food and Fluid Resource on the Hub, various other organisations. Next slide, please. So it's just to say thank you very much for listening today. And if you have any questions, there'll be the option at the end, and also you can get in touch with us. And it's been a pleasure to work with the Care Inspectorate as well to create this document. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Kim. That was really helpful. I'm sure everybody enjoyed that. Clapping hands there. Yeah, round of applause. Thank you again. So if we can move on now, I think Chris was going to join us. I'm not sure if Chris is on the call. We'll move.
Hi,
Yeah,
Joyce.
there he is.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris. Nice to see you.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. And
That's
we've got
okay.
your slides up for you. Thank you.
Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for the invite. I think it's just a brief one from me, to be quite honest. Amanda asked me if I would join the call and just showcase what we're doing currently as good practice at HC1. So for those, like it says there, I'm the exec chef and nutrition and hydration lead at HC1. So I'm responsible for the core menus and the special diets program that we run. I think a good place to start off is by boasting a little bit, and excuse me for that, but we entered into the Memory Care Pledge like many of us have with Vegetarian for Life. But I'd just like to say that as a business, we've managed to get 1,145 colleagues who have actually taken the Memory Care Pledge. I just heard the previous speaker talking about the lapel badges. They've They've all been issued with the lapel badges, and actually the feedback from those badges, once residents living with us, all that being residential or dementia, are actually recognising these symbols. So that's really, really good. We do boast on our core menu. We do boast across both seasonal, which is twice a year we change it, and the current menu cycle at the minute, we have 50 meat-free choices for our residents across a 6-week cycle. Now, when you put that down to a 6-week cycle, that might not sound as much, but just to reiterate, that is our core menu. So that's the offering on the core menu. But what we have done, I would like to share my screen with you and show you our internal intranet system, if I may. Bear with me 2 seconds. So this is, like many of us, we've got our internal intranet, and this is what ours looks like. And as part of that, we have a support tab. Now, all colleagues have access to this. So if we do have residents living in homes that are vegetarian or vegan, obviously that choice on the core menu won't satisfy their appetite completely. So what we have done as part of our special diets program is we have introduced onto our page, sorry, lost myself there. So on our special menus, on our seasonal menus, we've got in here all of our menus, all of our recipes available to us. Okay, but then what we do then is we've got the special diets tab. So when we go into the special diets tab, there's lots and lots of information around all different cultures and religious diets, and also medical. For this instance, obviously, we're going to talk about the vegetarian and vegan diets. So what chefs do is they navigate to here, they go into the drop-down tabs, and this is a live document. So what we do is every month we tend to add 10 or 20 more recipes that they can go into. They can print off for their home. Not only does it have the recipe, obviously the ingredients, but also the compliance stuff like the allergen matrix, allergens behind it. So we've got that for vegetarians, and we've also got for vegans. And what we've done recently is on our approved buyers list, so the commodities that the chefs can buy. We've been working again closely with Vegetarian for Life, and we've just created a store cupboard for them to use. So not everyday items, shall I say, such as tofu, gram flour and all that sort of thing, we have now added to our buying list so the chefs can achieve any of the recipes that we put on there, and also any other recipes that they might find themselves when they go searching. I think also what I would like to add is the collaborative working for us is so important. You know, a lot of people talk about vegans and vegetarians and the elderly, and it's not a common practice, and I'm just saying from what we hear from our chefs in our homes. But I think we're all very aware it's round the corner. It is coming. You know, if I was to say across 260 sites we've probably got that's been identified to us, we've probably got about 6 vegans. But we know that very quickly that will change. And what HC1 want to do is we want to make sure that we're ready for that change, so that there's no disruption to people's lives when they're moving into our homes, and we're ready for them. And one of the ways we are doing that is the collaborative working, and again, in particular with Vegetarian for Life. So next year we already have planned on the 21st of February a masterclass where we're bringing our chefs that have been identified. I think we've got about 12 chefs so far that have put their hat in the ring. They're going to come to a central location and they're going to get a masterclass from Alex from Vegetarian for Life. But that's got a bit of a bigger pitch to it, because what we'd like to do then is send them back out to their homes and do a live stream. And that live stream will be presented to the residents. And as Alex is live streaming to the residents, our chefs that have attended the masterclass are going to be in the kitchen cooking up the delights, so that they can actually share, and the residents can taste what they can see on TV. And also, just as finally, we're hoping to produce a short movie of cooking with alternative produce, obviously that being meat free. So yeah, so we're really busy, or we like to think we're really busy at HC1, and we're doing as best we can. And like I say, I just wanted to share that with you guys today. Thank you for that opportunity.
That's great, Chris. Thank you very much. And congratulations on your recent award.
Thank you very much.
So,
yeah.
Are you able to stay for the Q&A session?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So I'll invite the other speakers to put their mics and cameras on again, and if there's any questions in the chat, if folks want to post a question, we've got plenty of time. So are we moving on to another poll, Amanda?
Oh yes, please. So this is a bit of action planning. I'm hoping that everybody's left with some tips and a bit of inspiration. So I think this is going to take the form of a word cloud, but via the polls option. Do correct me if I'm wrong. So just to reflect after this webinar, how is it that you'll ensure the needs of the people you care for are met in relation to being vegan or vegetarian? So yeah, I can see it pop up on my own screen. So hopefully that's come onto all of your screens as well. We've got some quite fast typists. I can see 5 already ready to go.
We're mindful as well that not everybody on the call is providing care. We've also got some inspectors and improvement advisors and other colleagues as well. And there's a nice comment from my team colleague Nicola in the chat there about getting it right for people. We've also got Kerry, who's from the Quality Assurance Improvement Team at Torbay and South Devon Trust. So yeah, we said we potentially expected a UK-wide audience. And Ivan, the real issue is funding and resource. Do you know, for example, how many hours of a cook's time are funded for a 25-bed care home? Chris, maybe that's something that you would like to address.
Yeah, it is a good question, and the reason I say it is a good question is it's something that we're actually building a business case for now, not in particular around vegan and vegetarians, but especially around special diets, texture modified diets. So we are putting a business case together to try and encourage those extra hours. But I think what's more important than the hours, it's the manpower, you know, because we can give a chef or a catering team 3 or 4 hours extra in a day, but it's got to be physically achievable for that person. They're already not got enough hours. So it's about highlighting that another individual that can come into the kitchen and focus on those texture modified meals. So when we say special diets in its entirety, that's what I would put that into, rather than individually labeling it's for vegan, it's for vegetarian, or even texture modified. So yeah, so Joyce, yeah, I can only give you we're at the beginning stages of that business case, but it's coming more and more evident that, you know, time in the kitchen is not enough.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's helpful. Hope that's helpful to you as well, Ivan. And back to our word cloud, we've got 27 responses now, Amanda.
It's great. Just close the poll. If I can add something in relation to the affordability of funding, of training rather. So we offer a premium accredited membership, of which HC1 is a member, but that entitles your entire organisation to ongoing refresher training from us. So even if you're just a single care home, the life membership, don't all rush at once because it's really, really inexpensive, is only £75. And from that, everyone in your organisation will get access to a 2.5 hour long care catering for older vegetarians and vegans course. It's endorsed for CPD by the British Dietetic Association, and it's certificated. So that's a really good welcome point. But thereafter, you get a free in-person, if you want it, training session for 10 to 14 chefs every year of your membership. So it's excellent value for money. I think the most expensive membership that we have for the size of Chris's chain, over 300 sites, is only about £350 for a life membership. So it's very affordable. And you've heard of the ways that we've tried to get training to multiple sites at once through one of the things that Chris was talking about, you know, having an in-person masterclass and then use virtual technology and stream it to different sites. There's lots of ways that we can try and build in training for you.
Thanks, Amanda. That's great. Sorry, just to go back to Ivan's point, I think he was looking for an answer from either yourself, Amanda, or Kim around that. How many hours of a cook's time are funded for a 25-bed care home?
Do you specifically mean, Ivan, through our charity or as something different? I don't really understand, I suppose, the question there. Well funded.
Further down, he's saying that it's a question for the people who did the resource. I can't answer that, actually.
I
Maybe
don't know
that's
about
something.
NCHC funding. I don't know if, Chris, you've encountered that.
No, it's to be fair, it's not something that we've applied for because we didn't think that it was a thing. But it would just have to be put into your staffing hours, I would imagine. You know, we're just meeting the needs of the residents by doing that. So I've never heard of any funding for anything like that. Sorry, Ivan.
So
there's another initiative that we offer. Sorry, Joyce, you're about to say something.
Okay, no, carry on, Amanda.
To support vegan and veggie food initiatives, we do offer also a care reward. So that's if you have a specific event or something like that in mind. So it's currently Vegan Month, for instance, which is why we launched this webinar now. So if you think of a specific activity, whether it's a sampling day or something like that, you could get a grant from us. We've tried to make the application process as easy as possible, and up to £1,000 is available. So please do consider applying for that, and details are on our website. Or Joyce, will we be emailing everybody a follow-up after this, and we could just obviously give any links that have been referred to?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be
Thank
sending out the recording and the slides, and perhaps we could answer Ivan's question through that route as well. Apologies, Ivan. I know you mean the nursing care home contract, but other colleagues on the line are obviously not familiar with what happens in Scotland. Is there anything else anybody wants to?
Joyce, if I may do a little bit of a plug, and tell me if I can't. It's more about for people on the call that are operating within care homes. You know, will that be chefs or any sort of support management? Something that we've just started using, and we're going to start rolling out to the business. Now, obviously, we're on a large scale, so getting training into individual sites is challenging. But from a catering perspective, there's something called a UFS Academy, which is the Unilever Support Services Food Services Academy. Now, to join the actual app is free. So if you do have colleagues who are catering in the homes, there's about 1,000 videos in there, and a big part of that is around vegan and vegetarian cooking, and it's very basic from the beginning, and it produces dishes on there that they might be able to get some knowledge from.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you, Chris. Is there a link you could pop into the chat or share with us to share with the audience later?
I can put what the name of the app is, because it's an app. I don't think I've got a link. I'll have a little quick search while we're talking.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I've got a couple of folks just saying they've got to leave and thanking everybody for their input. Anything else before we close? Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you for everyone attending this afternoon. Thanks very much to our speakers, Amanda, Kim and Chris, for their input, and also to Jenny for our technical support. We've had a good overview of the quality illustration, how to apply that in practice, and really helpful case histories around people whose vegetarian and vegan needs haven't been particularly well met while in care. So just again to signpost to good practice and the resources that we've talked about this afternoon, there's a dedicated part of the Care Inspectorate Hub around that, but there's also the Vegetarian for Life website. And again, thinking about the Memory Care Pledge, there might be some providers out there that want to uptake this offer around training from Vegetarian for Life and keep that collaborative working together approach. So thank you again. We're just having a couple of comments in the chat there saying that thanking us for the webinar, and it's really thought-provoking and how we continue to improve what we do. So thanks again, everybody. It's been a really nice afternoon. All the best and take care.